While other frameworks like UI on .NET or outside Flutter drones the UI, .NET MAUI maps the abstraction to native controls to create the user interface. Today, in our awesome .NET MAUI series, we are going to talk about DrawnUi, an open source community library that offers drones controls
Today
from
we are
simple
going to talk
controls
about
like buttons
DrawnUi
to
for NET
more
MAUI.
complex stuff like,
It's
for
an open
example,
source
navigation
community
between tabs
library
or
created
collections.
by Nick
Let's take a look.
that allows you to get access to different 100% drawn controls using SkiaSharp, as well as access to gestures, animations, and many more options. It allows you to create applications like this one, from fully mobile or desktop applications with drawn controls, from simple controls such as sliders or toggle switch and others, to more complex controls such as navigation controls, tab bar, list of items, collections, or even video games. Today, we are going to focus on how this library works, how we can use it, and even how we can extend it to create our own controls. As usually, we will start by taking a look at the possibilities of the library before we get into the full view of the code. This is one of the applications that you can get access directly from the repository of the project in github.com taulas DrawnUi.Maui. You have access to this sample. Within the library, you have access to a section of controls among with different samples. You have a gallery where you can access to all the basic controls, for example, to manage data collections, manage scrolls, basic controls like sliders, switch, and other, and also more complex stuff, like for example, access to transformations, animations, or even convert views to PDF, for example. You can also get access to the entry set of controls with these possibilities, such as, for example, capturing text, with also writing text with multiple lines, multiple formats, display markdowns, and other stuff. Then we have more repositories. For example, we have access to a game, a shooter, the typical spacecraft game created entirely with this library, using the different controls like, for example, shapes and basic figures, image, and also loading animation to manage, for example, the explosion of the starship. And then also the final repository that I want to showcase today is this one. It's a comparison with respect native controls. Really, what happens behind this is really different between native and drawn controls. There are really differences in how we manage and how we draw the controls, the number of invalidations, measurements, and stuff is really different. In the case of the drawn sample, we have a single canvas to manage the two lists, the horizontal list and the collection list, and there are really big difference. But it's interesting to see how many times we get layout invalidations, calculations, and also to do the gestures to scroll and see how the application behave using different options to see what's going on and how it's managed. If you are interested to see this with more details, we can create a specific video doing this stack trace of what's going on, what's happening in every case in the native part and in the drawn part, and doing a comparison. But yeah, for now, let's talk about the library. What does the library include? What are the possibilities? Well, we can create 100% real applications with navigation options, listings. We can have different layouts. For example, for the listing, the library also includes different layouts, like for example, a grid, stack layout, both vertical and horizontal. Also, we can manage absolute positions, etc. We can create custom controls. For example, this is a control that allows us to make a picker of elements using an infinity screw loop. And let's see some more basic controls. Because we have access to different controls, we can customize the controls to give different appearance. For example, this will be the different switch on the different platforms like Android, iOS, and Windows platforms. We can create controls with different appearance based on the platform using some specific chains. And for example, with the slider, we can do something similar, customize things like the thumb, customize things like the control, adding a range uh, slider, etc. And the library also offers other possibilities like manage complex animations. We can also apply things like transformation. We can have, for example, a list with some transformations, both in the vertical and horizontal axis, to create something really custom. We can mix and combine native elements with drawn elements. In this case, for example, we have an element with a border that is drawn, but with an internal element that is a native entry, so we can get access to the native part, things like the contextual menu. It's a native element that allow us to do things like select everything, copy, paste, etc. We have more options like drawer controls, a drawer that we can access to counter with simple gestures. We have more complex controls like, for example, a carousel. We also have modal elements that we can embed any content, including native elements, like, for example, a web view. And we can create single pop-ups. And also we have options to save XAML to PDF, or even we can create more complex things, like, for example, using events like the scroll event and different gestures and different animation using the animator class that is included in the library allow us to create things like this sample, where we can drag and drop to perform complex animation and interactions with the user interface. This will be a quick summary of the possibilities that the library offers to us. But how about the code? How we can manage it? So we'll go to Visual Studio, to the library code that we have available right here, and let's see the possibilities of the library. The library allows us to draw the UI with hardware acceleration. We can easily create controls or animations using the controls both in XAML and C# code. And as we have already seen, we can get access to animations, transformations, both 2D and 3D transformations. We have access to gestures, as we have seen in the previous samples with the drag and drop element. We can render image using the library with some cache options when using it to improve the performance. So, for example, when we are using scroll elements, in this horizontal scroll, we only will render the visible elements on the screen by recycling the rest of the elements. We also have navigation options. For example, we have seen how we can have, for example, access to different controls like tabs. You can navigate across different tabs and navigate also backward. We can control these things by ourselves. For example, the library includes a base class called the Skia control, which we have available here. It's a class that inherits from visual element. The fundamental aspect and goal of this is allow us to use the entry set of controls in both XAML code and C# code, and also we can use hot reload. We have a key-based method that is the paint method, which is the one that receives the options such as the Skia drawing context, some argument to allow drawing all the options. From this basic control, we have other interesting elements that we can use when creating controls, such as, for example, the SkiaSharp, which is similar to what we have seen previously. We have different methods to, for example, arrange, etc. And what this does is override the paint method that we have available here, where we will do the drawing of all the options related to the control. If we are, for example, drawing stroke or not, if we are clipping, and if we are drawing a shape like, for example, a rectangle or an ellipse or etc., this class will be very useful when creating other controls via composition. For example, if we want to create a control with a specific form, this control will be extremely useful, along with other controls that will allow us, for example, to manage gestures with another control called the Skia hotspot. Let's continue taking a look to more interesting controls. We have the Skia image and the Skia SVG that allow us to manage different images with different filter options. And I will say that the next most interesting control is the Skia layout. This control allows us to position elements using different options. We have a grid, we have a stack layout, we have absolute positions. But the most interesting part is that allows us, for example, to date when child views or something change, the number of elements that we are initialization change, we include or remove childs, etc. We have events when everything is loaded, unloaded, when it's appearing, disappearing, and we also have option, for example, to initialize that child views directly drawing and managing how we draw these child drawing elements. These methods can be override when creating our own layout or controls based on this layout-based class. The next interesting control is the Skia scroll. There are different elements that use it and mostly allow us to build another type of element that will have a content bigger than the size of the screen. And we will use these types of elements, like all the base ones, to create and customize and build more complex controls. And we have, for example, buttons, carousel, cells, drawer, text controls, controls to capture text, all the different layouts, etc. We have the navigation options like pickers, radio buttons, shapes, sliders, switch, etc. And we can use all these controls to build all our own stuff or use it directly. So, for example, let's take a look to a Skia button. A Skia button inherits from a Skia layout. So we are doing a composition of controls. The most interesting part of the Skia button is where we override the create default content to set the content of the button. That will be the button text, the button icon, and all the content. We can override this Skia button, just creating a class that inherits from the Skia button, and use the different methods to override how we manage and how we draw the image, multiple text, for example, or multiple image, or whatever we want in a custom button. In this way, the library includes a set of core elements, as we have seen, Skia control, Skia scroll, etc., and a set of base controls like buttons, switch, etc., that we can use directly in our applications. But we can also use these base elements to create custom controls. So let's take a look to the sample again. I'm going to close the diagnostics windows to get more available space. And let's take a look to the preview and see the XAML to see how we can use this in XAML code. So, for example, we have all the tabs. We have a control Skia view switcher that will allow us to manage and change between different tabs. If we go to the home tab, for example, we can see that we have a view that have a gradient. That is the gradient that we can see here in the previewer. Then we have a layout where the navigation bar is defined at the top. Let's contrast this. And then we have a scroll because the whole view is scrollable. This scroll has, we have already seen, is one of the base control that we have seen previously. And now inside this control, for example, we can create different effects, manage different properties to manage the scroll events. For example, create parallax effects, managing properties like the friction, radius, and other stuff. It's highly customizable. Then we have here the text that we have on the top is a markdown label that allow us to display rich content, displaying icon, text, different types, etc. Then we have again a layout that will allow us to manage the content. It's a bundle layout. We are using the item source property and with the item template where we are going to customize all the content of every view. To use all these, we only need to use a namespace that we call it draw inside schemas@mobi.com DrawnUi 2023 draw. We have access to all these core controls, all base controls, and of course we can extend directly and create UI as we are taking a look directly from XAML, or even we can use C# code. Now that we have seen all the basic controls and how to use it, let's jump to another demo where we have one half with the collection view and another half with the drawn control. The app is working right here and we have the code available now. Let's take first a look to the sample running. This is the left side, the drawn control, the right one is the native one. So let's jump to the code. We have a grid with 2 columns, half and half, and on one side we have the home view, which is a view where we have a collection view, and then in the other side we have a canvas where we draw a layout, and inside it we are drawing a Skia scroll. Inside the collection view, we're using the Skia scroll again with the item source, item template, etc. properties to manage a collection. I encourage you to take a look to this example. For example, changing the number of items, putting a really high number of items and playing with the scroll, see how it manages every collection in Drawn and Native, taking a look to the, comparison of the application size, comparison of the startup time, comparison of the render time, because it's a really interesting, example where we can see the difference between, some drawn controls and native ones. But again, what's happening under the hood is really different. There are really different methods invoked to manage, the measurements, drawing and all the stuff. So if you are really interested in seeing more about this, please let me know in the comments of the video and we can take a look to it in another video. Well, we have seen a little bit so far what the library offers to us, how you can create a user interface, both drawn and making a mix of drawing and native. Let's see now how we can create, for example, even more complex options. Here is another sample that it's a video game. We have a spacecraft, we can shoot, we have different enemies, we have our life bar right here. I'll leave a little bit of time to get some impacts and see how I get damage, and the life bar it's going down. Okay, so how this is done, how it's working. It's similar to the previous one, but with small difference. If we go directly to the space shooter demo, we can see that we have a main page on XAML. If we open it, I'm going to close diagnostics again to get more space. We can see here that we have a main space shooter view, that is the game, and then we are a custom control scalable FPS where we are displaying the FPS of the game to manage and control the performance at all the time. Well, what we are more interested is something called space shooter that is inside of the game folder, and we have here this space shooter class. We have again a layout where we put the background image with the stars of the background of the game. We have here something called Skia image tiles, which is to repeat image, which is to create the effect of the stars, the background with the stars in the background. We have the background with the planet. Then we have here different labels, one to display the score, and we play with the gradient here directly to manage the style of the game. We have another label where we display the score to, and just below we draw a picture with the sprite that is the starship. We just have it here. We also are using Lottie. We will use different animations to manage the shield of the starship. We also have different animations to manage, for example, the collision, explosion, and also we have the health bar. What is the health bar? Well, it's simple. It's another view. It's just a rectangle with a gradient and just a little bit of code with the different properties, minimum, maximum, and the value to play a little bit with it and update it in a easier way when we get some collisions with the enemies and manage the life of the starship easily. All this space shooter, the big difference is that create a class that inherit from Maui game that has a loop. What have experience developing games, this is pretty well known. It's a loop where it's running all the time, validating the state of the game, detecting the collisions. We do sprite translation from the enemies, upward, downwards. Also, we detect where if the enemy is active or not to destroy it, and we also make sure that we are managing hits on sprite to manage the ballet when the spaceship is shooting. And at the end we are managing here different parts of the game inside this big loop, but everything is managed with the graphics library, using sprite, using image, using shapes, for example, for the ballet, using Lottie animations to manage the different animations, and everything is done using XML code. How can you transfer all this to your own project? Well, if you want to combine DrawnUi with native UI, we already have seen how in the start demo it's done. But if you want, for example, to replace specific controls like, for example, labels or collection views, etc., also it's extremely simple option. You just have to install the library. We can manage it using Nugget package, and once we manage the Nugget package, as we can read in the documentation, we need to install the package called app.maui.drawnui, and once we do it, we need to go to the Maui program class, and inside the Maui program class use the extension method to use DrawnUi. This is an extension method that will initialize, for example, SkiaSharp, and will do some interesting stuff, but also will allow us to do some configurations like, if you use the keyboard, the desktop window size, etc., etc. And then you can create your own controls or access to the controls of the library. We create the namespace definition, and once we define the namespace definition, we can just directly go to the controls folder, for example, from the sample. For example, we have here the wheel picker we saw earlier. It's a layout with a gradient, and then use a scroll. We have the options of the scroll with different orientations. In this case, it's vertical, but both directions are supported. And we use here an option, SkiaScroll Looped, to create an infinity loop scroll, starting again for by the first item when we reach the end. We have a composition of controls to create the appearance with the gradient, and also we manage different controls with different properties to manage the behavior of the control. We can also create other types of controls, like, for example, a slider range. A slider range has created using, for example, the thumb with an SVG, and it's the control that inherits from the Skia slider. It's an existing control, but then in this case we use, for example, some chains and some compositions, triggers, etc. to manage the different chains in this control. Here we have the zone where we are changing the shape to use something customized. Something simpler, for example, we can go to the button. We are doing something similar. We are overriding the button and modifying some basic properties, like, for example, the touch effect color, that is, the ripple effect, and finally just changing the content. Background with the shape, and then the content is used a label to display a text. So we are keeping everything like the effects, like the ripple effect, etc., just using the tag property, maintaining the case used in the tag. So internally the control will still keep accessing to these controls, the override controls, but using these controls to do things like the ripple effect and other stuff. And we also can have access to more complex stuff, like, for example, shaders. These are some, videos from upcoming new functionality, and allow us to create things like, for example, transitions, complex transitions using, for example, a carousel, or even complex transitions navigating, or, for example, creating custom controls, manipulations, or, for example, touch effects. In this case, we are creating a custom ripple effect with different reflections and some complex stuff. This will add some complexity, allow you to reach new limits when it comes to customizing your applications with NET MAUI.
And we get to the end of the video. I hope that the content has been useful for you. If so, remember to like and also to subscribe to not miss notifications when new content is released. See you soon!